All right, hello everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. Um, Welcome and happy almost World Water Day. My name is Katie. For those of you who don't know me, I work on the partnerships and communications team at the Green Sports Alliance. This year, World Water Day lands on March 22nd, which is tomorrow. It's a day that we raise awareness and inspire action to tackle the water and sanitation crisis. World Water Day for the next hour. For the next hour, we're going to talk about water, obviously. At the Green Sports Alliance, we are a resource and we also put out resources. In June of 2023, we put out this playbook called All Sports Are Water Sports. You can scan the QR code for the full download now. And today we are welcomed by four, hopefully five professionals. We're having some technical difficulties right now, but so I'll introduce you to our panelists. We'll have Matt moderating as a pinch hitter for Christy, who might join us in a bit. But first we have Matt Howard, who is the VP of Water Stewardship at the Water Council. Matt oversees the Water Council stewardship initiatives, including WAVE, Water Stewardship Verified, Water Stewardship Advisory Services, and Comprehensive Professional Water Stewardship Training. That's quite a mouthful. And Benjamin Ella, Senior Mechanical Designer at Stantec. He has over 23 years experience designing sports, recreation, and leisure facilities as diverse as community recreation facilities, amateur training facilities, Olympic venues, and professional competition venues. And then we have Paul Sambanese, Vice President of Sustainability at Sloan. He is responsible for developing, managing, and constantly improving the sustainability program across the company. And finally, we have Victor Ferry, Senior Director of Vertical Marketing for Building Solutions at Xylem. He leads the development of go-to-market strategies for Xylem's water solutions portfolio in the built environment and is a key collaborator with water technology projects between Manchester City FC and Xylem as the official water technology partner. And now I'm going to pass it off to Matt to start moderating.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate everyone taking the time today, and just a little overview of All Sports or Water Sports Playbook. Big shout out to Dune Ives for really helping to put this together. Stantec and Xylem with some great case studies and thought leadership throughout. And really the connection point between water and sports is that without water, we're not going to be able to do any of the sports that we love to enjoy, whether it is a sport that leverages grass on the fields or any venue that we're in that relies on water as a key resource. So what we wanted to do with this playbook is first and foremost put out a resource on water, since that was our first of the sort. And along with that, really talk about the current state, what you can do to understand your water baseline, how to reduce within a venue, how you can reuse water and collect it, as well as water replenishment and ecosystem stewardship. So with all that being said, I'm really excited to jump right into things here and turn it over to Matt Howard. So Matt, from the perspective of the Water Council, can you help frame up this challenge for us?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks for the introduction and to the Green Sports Alliance for hosting this webinar. Again, my name is Matt Howard, Vice President of Water Stewardship at the Water Council. For those of you that don't know us, we are a nonprofit headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but we work globally with companies and organizations on water quality and quantity challenges. So we really address the full range of issues from technology deployment all the way over to water stewardship and working one-on-one with companies to help them understand how they're using and impacting water resources. So when we look at this issue today, and water is an issue, obviously, that's not just facing this particular sector. It's a cross-sectoral issue. It's a cross-regional issue. There's a water crisis everywhere, every day, somewhere on this planet. And so one of the things in terms of setting kind of a baseline, if you will, and we'll talk about the baseline in terms of strategy one for the playbook here in a second, but just in terms of that baseline of general understanding and knowledge around water, there's a couple of things to note. The first thing is, number one, water is different than energy and carbon, right? And so I know companies and organizations are used to dealing with energy efficiency, carbon reductions, things like waste reduction, et cetera. Water's different. So it requires a bit of a different analytical lens and framework to address. But the other issue, and as we see here up on the screen, that's really impactful in terms of moving forward for companies to address water issues, is the fact that it's a bit of a wicked problem. And I've got that in quotes, wicked problem, because this is actually an area of academic study. And essentially what researchers have defined as a wicked problem has these characteristics or traits that you can kind of see up there on the screen. I'm not going to talk about each one, but just a couple to kind of point out in terms of water and why it can be so challenging for organizations and sectors to address water issues is, number one, there oftentimes are no clear solutions to the challenges that we find in our watersheds. And if you look at a basin like the Colorado River, for instance, you will find that you've got multiple different types of water users, from agriculture to cities to hydroelectric and thermoelectric power. And you've got water rights in that situation. And so when it comes to addressing the long-term scarcity and over allocation issue with that particular basin, there's really no clear solution. And that's why the parties in the states have really had a difficult time over the past handful of years reaching a negotiated settlement on water use in that basin. So that's a big macro example, but maybe moving into unforeseen outcomes at the facility level, thinking about a sports facility or an entertainment venue. If you're focusing on water conservation and water quantity issues, as you reduce that intake, you could have an impact on the back end on water quality, because you've increased the concentration of nutrients or pollutants or things that need to be addressed in your effluent. So we maybe find a solution. It's not the perfect solution. And then we see we have this unforeseen outcome. So there's a bunch of reasons here. And you can see, again, these key characteristics or traits about why water is such a wicked problem. The last one is really the interdependency issue you can see up here on the screen. In energy, for instance, they're connected, right? So the amount of water that's required in thermoelectric energy generation or hydroelectric energy generation is immense. And then if you look at the amount of energy that's required for water cleaning and distribution, et cetera. So all of these things kind of contribute to, making water a difficult issue for organizations to address. Next slide, please. And so what we really see as a result of that, these kind of overriding factors, that water requires a different analytical lens. It's a wicked problem, so to speak. We see that the companies face a bit of what's called an execution gap. So they develop a baseline or a knowledge of understanding, but then they're still unsure of how they should act. What's the highest priority risk? Where should I allocate my scarce resources? And this execution gap is something that, again, that we see in all different types of sectors, from food and beverage to petrochem to sports, leisure, recreation, et cetera. And so we really spend a lot of time at the Water Council trying to move people beyond that gap and to get into action. And there's some real consequence of not acting. CDP, a reporting framework that many organizations use, has actually quantified this cost of inaction, of addressing water issues when you first learn of them. It's 5 times higher, this cost of inaction. So the longer you wait to address water issues, the more expensive they become. Thus, we get to the playbook, right? And so it's so important looking at strategy number 1 in terms of understanding that baseline. You can't do anything until you understand your baseline, until you start collecting data, until you build that situational awareness. And so we talk a lot about that. Just in terms of the organizations that we're working with, that idea of situational awareness, both inside the fence line, how water is being used and impacted within your operations, but also outside the fence line. And that baseline is laid out in the strategy and the playbook, will lead you then ultimately to take the right actions, to focus your resources at the highest priority sites or risks that you face. And then that sets you up for your water journey. So if we get into the next slide, you may be asking yourself as you're watching this webinar, well, I'm not in California, I'm not in Arizona, I'm not really all that water intensive. Why should I care? Well, here's why you should care. So this is a risk map from WRI Aqueduct. And essentially what we're seeing here on the left-hand side is water stress in the US. The darker the color, the higher the stress. And again, you can see kind of the obvious areas in the United States that we hear a lot about in terms of water scarcity and conservation issues. But if you look at the middle part of the country, the breadbasket, if you will, up into the prairie provinces of Canada, over to the Great Lakes and down into the southeast coast of the US, we still see red and orange. And a lot of that is not because of scarcity, it's because of water quality related issues. And in fact, if you look over on the right-hand map, the future projections 6 years from now, things aren't getting better. And if you look around the Great Lakes, for instance, you see a lot of red, not because of lack of water. We've got all the fresh water we're ever going to need in the Great Lakes region. It's a water quality issue. So for organizations out there, again, yes, it's important to focus on conservation and to be aware of whether or not you're in a water scarce region. But just because you aren't in one of those regions doesn't mean that you won't face some type of water risks. And so as an example from this industry, and this is public, this was reported in our news media here in the Milwaukee region, where the Milwaukee Brewers play, their stadium district last year was hit with a 30% increase in their insurance premium, primarily because of the increased incidence of rain, more rain in the springtime in this region, and as a result, more flooding and more runoff. So that's a pretty significant increase in cost because that insurance and premium for that stadium district isn't cheap to begin with. And then in addition to the premium, then there's a bit of a push now to try and develop some riparian barriers, some other things to prevent flooding and to slow runoff into local waterways. So it's not just a conservation or scarcity play when it comes to water. We also have to expand that risk radar and think of some of these other challenges and opportunities. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we really focus then on here at the Water Council is working with organizations of all shapes and sizes to really build that baseline, to build that understanding around water use impact and risk. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I just don't have a single facility, I got maybe several facilities in a region or multiple states, that really becomes difficult when we think about, how complex water issues are. Now, how do you as an organization assess risk across many sites in many regions where you operate? So we've developed a bit of a step-by-step approach, a verification program to help companies do just that. Build that operational water profile across their organization. Then as a result of that, assess risk, and then ultimately prioritize where they're going to act. Because when it comes to water, you got to make sure that you're doing the right things at the right times and at the right places, because it's so hyper local and context is so important. So I guess the takeaways here for me as we move on from strategy number one and kind of this introductory statement on why water and why it's important for the sector is number one, it's a difficult issue that requires your attention. And as a result, you need to bring a bit of a different analytical lens or framework to this picture. And you can't assume just because you're not in a water scarce region or you're not obviously water intensive that you won't face some type of risk, whether that's a quality issue, a regulatory risk, you name it, it's out there. So we need to look beyond just the direct costs to procure water and look at all the costs, indirect costs, cost of inaction as well. And so building that baseline using this playbook, I think is really going to set up organizations well to move forward in their water stewardship journey. Back to you, Matt.
Really appreciate it. I think you covered a lot there, and we'll kind of move on to Benjamin next with Stantec. So Ben, you've been a part of designing stadiums and sports venues around the world. Where do you start in terms of actually reducing water use? Strategy number 2 in the playbook.
Yeah, well, and I apologize to everyone for my kind of croaky voice today. I caught a cold at the beginning of this week. Before I go into that really hard, I want to second something Matthew said there in the previous comments about if you think you're not in a water scarce area. In Canada, we have about 20% of the world's fresh surface water, and we are regularly seeing droughts year after year. And there's a concern that there's going to be another drought this year. And Canadians as a whole had a tendency to not worry about water, and it's becoming a topic that's coming up more and more. And so going along with that, it would be nice if there was one foolproof solution that suits all facilities. I would love to come in and say, this is the way to go. This is what you have to do to reduce your water use, to reuse water, to reduce your impact on the potable water sources in your area, on the municipal service, whatever options there are. But really, to succeed, you need to look at what you have personally, what you're dealing with personally. Not all organizations, not all locations are going to be having the same complications. So typically when we're looking at a project, and we look at the very similar things that we do when we're looking at an energy or carbon reduction program for a client, when we're looking at a water reduction and water reuse program. So we go through 5 steps. And the first step is setting your values. By having values for this project, it doesn't necessarily need to be organizational values, but values for your water use reduction. It's going to be motivational. It helps the team keep going. It also is directional. It helps you as a team to make sure you're staying on the path that you wanted to be on. It can be easy to get going down a path and get distracted by, the signs on the side of the road and go, oh, look, there's the road to the largest banana in the world. And by having values, it allows you to keep checking back on what you're doing and correcting your path and following that path towards your goals. So the next important thing is measurement. You need to understand what your loads are, what your concerns are, where you're using them, how you're using them. As an example, if you do a measurement exercise and you discover you have a spike in water use on Thursdays, or maybe during the third quarter specifically of a game, there's always a spike in water use, or maybe there's a strange drop off in water use at some, at the half of the game where you'd expect a spike in water use. Also, maybe you're using water at times when the building's unoccupied. Maybe you have a leak that you don't realize. All these things are important in being able to set your goals for your process, for your project, for your organization. And if you don't have goals, if you haven't measured, you don't know where you start, you don't know when you finished, you don't know when you've succeeded. It's like setting out on a journey without having a destination. Some people say life's a journey, not a destination. Well, in this case, we want a destination. We want to improve our water performance. And then once we have our values and our goals, we're able to, once we have our values and have measured and understand what's happening in our facility, what's happening across our organization, then we can set goals. And like I said, with measurement, if you don't have goals, you don't know if you've succeeded. And it's important. It's something people talk about often about making SMART goals. And sometimes, SMART goals make sense. I think when you're talking about something technical like this, having specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based goals is very important. Otherwise, they become too daunting. They become they're either irrelevant or too large of a scope. They need to be broken up into smaller pieces to be able to be achievable. There's the adage about the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? So any problem, the way to deal with it is in small pieces, and to recognize those small pieces and break them up and make them in a way that you can deal with them. From that point, that's really when you can start planning. Not everything can be done tomorrow or at the same time. You are going to have choices at different facilities based on a number of factors, based on everything from when your season happens, if you're a sporting venue, to the age of your facility. You could have an older facility that has older plumbing fixtures. Well, a really simple solution might be to replace your plumbing fixtures with newer plumbing fixtures. Between 1993 and present, toilets have had a 62% decrease in water usage. Lavs, hand washing sinks, have had a 93% decrease in water usage. Showers have had something like a 95% decrease in water usage. There's huge opportunities there in an existing facility to make small changes in your existing conditions that will affect the whole thing. Also, in your measurement, if you've discovered that there's water usage at times that there shouldn't be water usage, having a program of looking for leaks, finding leaks, repairing, ongoing repair and maintenance is all good planning strategies that can have a really excellent impact on your community. When you think about large water systems, municipalities have huge water systems. And one thing that they account for is a certain percentage of leakage every year out of the water transfer systems. Well, our systems within buildings aren't as huge as that. So we have an opportunity to find those leakages and stop them ahead of time before they become a real impact on our system. And then if you're looking at a new facility or major upgrades to your facility, there's really good opportunities for water use recycling and other opportunities throughout your building. I love the example of the climate change arena, which is capturing their rainwater off their roof and using it for ice making. Ice making in the NHL is a huge component of water use. The water used in just the regular season for the NHL in a single sheet of ice is the equivalent that the average American family uses in 9 months. So the amount of water that an average American family uses over the period of the hockey season is the same that they use just for the ice, never mind any other use. Something that would want to be considered too is community engagement on opportunities for water reuse, on how the community, it's engaging the community is the start in educating the community. Listening to the community, sometimes they don't know what they don't know and they don't understand why you'd want to do water reuse. In Canada, we have that quite often. There's a statement that, we have lots of water in Canada. This isn't a problem. But then when we start engaging with them and educating them, they come with us with ideas too about how to fulfill these goals that you might have in his organization or different organizations have. And then, of course, like anything, you have to execute. All the plans and goals in the world have no value unless they're executed, unless they're carried out. And by having goals that are based on actual measured values and reasonable plans, then you'll have an excellent and reasonable execution methodology. And in the long run, it will be a benefit for your organization, and it will be a benefit for the community at large. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's something that I wish I could come in and talk to people and go, well, here, this is the thing you need to put in, but it's changes for everyone, and there's options for every organization to improve their water use. If I could have the next slide, please, Matt. So I thought what would be nice is if I gave you a few examples of projects we've done where we've been able to reduce the water use. Now, these are primarily new facilities. They're kind of more interesting. It's less digging around in the dirt and putting in new toilets and that. So, but there is real opportunities in existing facilities. So the three facilities I'm going to talk about here, one is the Hillcrest Park, which was the 2010 Winter Olympics venue for curling and wheelchair curling in Vancouver. It was my first Olympics project. It was quite a cool project, and I quite enjoyed it. It was really neat. The next one is the Gary W. Harris Canada Winter Games Center. In Canada, every 2 years, we have Winter Games for amateur athletes throughout Canada. And this venue was used for ice hockey, sledge hockey, basketball, badminton, squash. I think that was everything. And then the final one is a facility that we're starting the design on. It's just been approved by the local municipal council and provincial government in Italy. It's a stadium that's going to serve the Samrisi Calico soccer team. They're FIGC soccer team, so they're in the UEFA League in Italy. And when it's all done, it will hold 6,000, about 6,500 people for soccer games, and about 13,000 people for non-sporting events, concerts and the like. So let's go back to Hillcrest again. At Hillcrest, Vancouver is quite a wet area, but the Vancouver Olympic Planning Committee wanted to plan for the future, and they were, even 10 years ago, we were starting to see changes in the climate, and people were aware of these. So this building is a very energy efficient building, and the client said, we want to go beyond just energy and carbon efficiency, but we want to also look at how we affect all the incoming services, all the utilities that come into our building. And so we started looking at how to provide water use reduction. And we started with the simple, the low-hanging fruit, as some people would say. And we started with reducing the loads by going with fixtures that had higher performance, better performance, using less water for toilet flushing, etc. As we were investigating the site, doing ground testing and stuff like that, we discovered that there was quite a large water source underneath this building that was going to have to be dewatered, but the water wasn't suitable for drinking water or other potable sources, as it was contaminated with ground sourced iron. It was contaminated by natural iron in the environment. So what we did was we decided to capture water off the roof and from the groundwater, held it, treated it, and then sent it out to the building to be used for toilet and urinal flushing. And we also used it for some landscaping, though mostly we tried to do xeriscaping to reduce our overall loads. It was mostly used for landscape setting. Now, this was kind of an interesting project because at the time, the Canadian and BC building codes did not allow for water reuse. We had to go through a lot of political work, a lot of work with our inspectors and the like to get approval to prove to them that this was going to be a suitable system and this water was going to be safe to be used for toilet flushing and urinals. And eventually we got the approvals through a lot of hard work, and it resulted in the Canadian building code being changed. Non-potable water to be used for toilet flushing and urinal flushing is now an acceptable methodology in the Canadian building code. So our hard work in the long run was very, very successful and changed how water is considered in Canada and how we look at it for especially these sanitary conditions. The next item was the Gary W. Harris, and we did that project about 5 to 6 years ago. It was opened. And once again, we started at the start point of reducing our loads. Anytime you do any sort of energy, environmental project, my number one recommendation to a client is let's find ways to reduce the loads before we start thinking about how to improve the performance. No resource is infinite, and so the more we can sip at the resource instead of gobble the resource, the better performance we're going to have. This building had a very large roof area. It covered over 1 million square feet, the roof area. And so we captured rainwater off the roof of this building. We also captured rainwater from the surrounding landscape. We then held the water, treated it, and once again sent it to urinals and toilets. And we also used it with limited treatment for the landscaping. The landscaping in that, once again, was xeriscaping. It was landscaping that was suitable for the local environment to reduce the amount of irrigation that would require. It's nice that over the years, while some of the technology has changed, and there's manufacturers out there that, for example, for Hillcrest, we had to build up our water treatment system from a bunch of different manufacturers. For Gary W. Harris, there was manufacturers that produced treatment systems that we could bring in as a skid-mounted package and connect up to our cistern to treat the building. So we could see a progress in time from 2009 to 2017 when Gary W. Harris was opened. And now we're looking at the future and what we're going to do for the San Remo Stadium. And once again, we're looking always at the beginning of minimizing our loads. We're looking at low flow fixtures. We're looking, I'm no expert in this, but we have a real expert in play fields and the different grasses and sods and that. So we're looking at different technologies for for grasses that play well on, that they're be able to use at high levels for sport, but that use less water. And watering is a huge component of any sort of facility with natural grass. We're also using we're looking at all the possibilities of capturing water. We've got a large site, a large roof area we want to capture water off of. We have some groundwater in the area that we might be able to take advantage of that is being discharged to the ocean. We're actually just well, I'm going to say 100 meters, but that's about 300 feet off the Mediterranean with this facility. So we're right close to the Mediterranean. We're looking at using gray water in this facility. So the water coming off of sinks and showers can be treated and reused for toilet flushing, for things like cooling towers, other cooling opportunities, and also for some cleaning if you're doing spraying down of your seats and that. We also are looking at systems that there's some irrigation systems out there that will allow you to irrigate your field, but then has another set of pipes in it that any water that isn't captured by the grass, it will draw it back to holding tanks to be used for irrigation again in the future. And then we're going to use this as much as we can throughout this building, where we want to connect up the toilet flushing, the irrigation, the cleaning, the mechanical systems, wherever possible. We wanted to disconnect things from the city service. If it's not going to be physically going into a person, whether it be inhaled from, water vapor from a shower or drank from a glass of water, we want to try to avoid using potable water. So, really exciting things that we're looking at for the future. And we're really, we think this is where everybody's going to be going here. And so, it's been really a pleasure to talk to you guys, and I'll pass it on to, I think it's Paul next.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ben. Really good insights there and great real world examples. So next we're going to talk about strategy number 3. Water reuse is a part of a holistic sustainability strategy. Paul, can you share what Sloan is doing to support venues in this area?
Absolutely. Thank you. So everyone, Paul Simmons, Vice President of Sustainability here at Sloan. We're if you could proceed to the next slide, we'll walk you through. I think it kind of dovetails a lot what Matt was introduced us with and Benjamin was just talking about. And the first step, of course, is measuring sustainability, helping with accessing progress, encouraging participation, assessing trade-offs, meeting or anticipation new requirements, and rewarding excellence, and conferring the benefits, right, of water reuse. And it can help with, of course, first understanding, tracking, and assessing progress, and encouraging broad participation by stakeholders, right? Benjamin mentioned community engagement, right? And really evaluating the sustainability trade-offs and meeting and anticipating some new requirements, right, as part of this. Because, of course, with the water scarcity that Matt was touching upon earlier in the slides, I imagine a lot of local and state regulations are going to change ultimately. And so we're going to find opportunities here to get ahead of the curve and really reduce your water or have the ability to clean your water to be reused on site ultimately as part of that process. Next slide, please. So we've all heard the term smart buildings, right? That's something that is growing as you can see as an industry here. There are technical standards behind it. It's called Spire 2.0, is developed by the Telecommunications Industry Association. And they estimated that $215 billion by 2030 of what the smart building market will look like. And for those that aren't aware of what this term means, it's basically just bringing systems and seamlessly integrating and sharing data and allowing them to manage through a single interface with minimal human involvement, right? Most building measurements come from meters in the building. Traditional stadium, you have 1 meter coming in, maybe, or obviously multiple meters hopefully coming in because you have a lot of water usage, and then meters going out, but you really can't understand what is your water in between. So you need to really develop and understand what are your significant water users are, so you can make smart and significant changes associated with that. So that's what the first step of something that we developed, and that's visualized in our next slide here. So we created what's called the SE Argus Pro. A lot of your faucets, flushometers, and other devices have what's Bluetooth technology in there, so you can actually measure your water usage at the moment. It's based on the flow rate of the design and the activation duration in which it occurs. We can measure the water usage, and then there's other benefits besides just water, and there's a health and wellness aspect of it too, right? So hygiene, you have what's called Legionella if water gets stagnated. You can do line flushes if there's long periods of time in which water is not being utilized. And you can get some kind of weird metrics, of course, little hygiene ratios, faucet to toilet activation. So how many people are actually washing their hands after they use the restroom? And it allows you then to also have swift diagnosis alarms, right? Benjamin touched upon this as well. Having an understanding of, are there any leaks that are occurring, right? Or other things as well is instrumental, because it's one thing to develop a project or have a water savings with new projects or new equipment that's installed, but it's also the ongoing maintenance aspect of it. So you have some labor and time savings by being automatically notified. You get a notification to the maintenance person or the person involved, so they can go and respond and do something about it. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, that's a whole nother system I have to look at or evaluate for those that maintain stadiums. We do have our roadmap for this year to develop a API to integrate that data into a building management system. And so that's something that when it comes to measurement is, and just kind of summarize a lot of what Matt and Benjamin talked about on how we can do. Next slide. So now we're talking about reuse, right? And so as we really talked about, it really requires us to really, it's very dependent on your area and what can we do to help work with customers. And so we've developed what we call an ESG water SEO, right? So we're trying to work together with customers, provide an end-to-end commercial water management solution, right? I know restrooms is what our focus and our expertise in. We've been doing it for the last 118 years, but water really needs to be looked at a building level. So we've been piloting a program where we're really starting to look at water and see what we can do to go to a customer site and do an evaluation for free and give them opportunities to think about what of things to consider. An example of that, we've actually kind of already started working with Wrigley because of course Sloan and Wrigley have a strong partnership, and we've already started preliminary work with developing a alternative water system there. And so that is something that we're seeing some good results, potentially a 34% water reduction, and then they can have some irrigation, use that water for irrigation, the rainwater that does come on site, and then use it to water the field, which is great. It's a great story to tell to people that are coming in, the younger generations, very interested in that aspect of it. Next slide. So the free evaluation, just some of the things, the sources that you have to consider and think about that we touched upon, right, is condensate from your building management, your building automation system and HVAC systems, excuse me, rainwater, reclaimed water, stormwater, gray water. These are all terms and water that you could potentially use to be then used on site and treated for non-potable water, right? You can clean the water significantly, and maybe in some cases it may be good enough to drink, but most municipalities will not allow that. So you can really use it for a lot of non-potable uses. So that means, watering the fields if you have them, or using them to flush toilets, as Benjamin mentioned. There's a lot of ways you can reuse water on site, ultimately. And that evaluation looks on the right here, and it's hard to see, but it's just to give you an idea of what the percentage of total demand you can meet by using these various water resources and cleaning them, and then doing some engineering drawings and preliminary diagrams so you can see what it would look like. In most cases, it doesn't really, there is of course certainly some new equipment that needs to be installed ultimately, but we're usually talking about like an 8 by 5 foot space that would be needed. And then, of course, some piping associated with it. So not a significantly huge space that, you know, you would assume would be needed as part of this process. It really isn't that big of a deal, especially, but it's also dependent, of course, what equipment and what the stadium looks like, or arena in that case. Next slide. The other quicker, easier things, of course, some things is once you reuse that water, we talked about reclaiming it and using it to flush toilets. Just one thing to touch upon real quick is you can't use a traditional diaphragm or other equipment from a toilet. You have to have one that are specially made, because that water is not the same, of course. I mean, it's less treated and can have a lot of hardness and other aspects. So when we build a diaphragm flushometer for that, we make it beefier so it can handle that water ultimately. But there's other things as well. We have, of course, waterless urinals too, and you can use in men's restrooms. And something that we've started also doing, and a lot of people that have utilized and been in men's restrooms, the urinals, waterless, do have a bit of an odor to it. We do have what's called a hybrid waterless urinal, which will inject water, 1 gallon of water every 72 hours, just to keep that water flowing a little bit, but not significant water usage compared to a traditional urinal or toilet or other things as well. So just to summarize it, you know, and is to understand your water usage is the first step to develop a proper water strategy. It's kind of relying on your water bill alone will not help you understand your significant water uses. So, you know, and of course, as we mentioned, toilets and urinals can account for 1/3 of your building water consumption. So consider some of the things that, you know, about projects that Benjamin's done previously, and really work through that. And, you know, we really want to do to collaborate and evaluate. That's the beauty of sustainability, and all the professionals here, I think, would agree. We want to work together with you guys to help you develop a solution, especially for World Water Day tomorrow. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think next we're going to pass it to Victor, but before that, maybe we'll start with this video.
Sound is not playing.
Yeah, I don't think the audio is working, Katie.
Sorry,
If I can make a recommendation, if you share your screen, if you do share a screen, and then make sure that you have click share audio and optimize for video.
Share audio.
You also might have been on mute when you were sharing that, Katie.
Yeah.
Refocus.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the second half
Can
is
you start it over though, please? Thanks.
Wait, sit down, guys, sit down. Guys, listen to me. We need to do so much more. And I know you feel it. It's half time. So let's regroup and refocus. Because the second half is where we can win it, where we can achieve our goals, our water goals. You hear me? Water goals. 7 years ago, the world set a goal to tackle our global water challenges by 2030. We are already halfway, and we are not where we need to be. So we all need to do more.
You're right, boss. We need to do our bit to tackle water, because water issues affect every one of us and every community around the world.
Guys, it's not about a big heroic efforts.
It's about doing small things that all add up to something bigger.
He's right. If we all take small actions, if we work as a team, we can turn this around. I believe in you. We believe in you. The game is always won in the second half. So let's go out there and be water champions, because it's all to play for.
Well, Victor, sports venues traditionally are a place of community gathering and celebration. Can you share a little bit about the critical role of community and engagement in the success of behavioral change there?
Sit down, guys, sit down.
Sorry.
Sure. So,
Sit
hi,
down,
Matt.
guys,
Hi,
sit down.
everyone.
Guys.
Pass on the next. Yeah, you can do it like that. So, yeah, thanks, Matt, for the question. And hi, everyone. I'm Victor Ferre, representing Xylem, responsible for building services vertical in Europe. We've heard through this panel a lot of technical solutions. We've also heard about community engagement. I think it's clear to everyone that water is a global concern, and it won't be fixed only with technology. It is a very complex problem, as Matt said at the very early stage. I think it takes a degree of personal commitment and personal awareness on where the solutions are and what we can do. So at Xylem, what we are trying to do with those campaigns together with Manchester City is to reach a very global audience. So Xylem is a water technology leader. Say our business is very much business to business, is B2B, but we have a purpose which is addressing global water scarcity and access to safe water. We thought when we started this partnership with Manchester City that would allow us to reach a very global and diverse audience that we typically don't access by being a B2B business. So yeah, in that respect, it is a unique platform. It allows us to really speak and deliver a message through passion. So I think it's very important what we're doing with these campaigns. This campaign, by the way, is called All to Play For. This is the latest we have. We appeal to passion. We appeal to positiveness. We don't want to deliver a message of doomed future. It's more like, let's win the game on the second half. So yes, I think this addresses part of your question. I guess at Xylem, I think we believe in social engagement, and that's something we have in common also with Man City in this case.
So next question. How are Xylem and City Football Group leading the way in terms of water responsibility and sustainability?
Yeah, so our partnership is with Manchester City, but not alone. Manchester City is part of the City Football Group. It's a conglomerate of 12 soccer clubs, football clubs around the world. So our partnership is mostly with Manchester City in Europe, New York City Football Club in the Americas, and Mumbai City Football Club in Asia. So we truly have this access to a global audience. And first and foremost, as I said, raising awareness is very important. But then we also have another way of making an impact, and that's by deploying technology. So we have a very broad portfolio of technologies, and what we are doing together with these clubs is we are on a journey to pretty much follow the playbook that we've been talking about here at the Global Sports Alliance. So we want to, first of all, establish a baseline. So each of those clubs has a history. In some cases, they are clubs with more than 100 years of history. In some cases, stadiums are 30, 40 years old. In other cases, it's new infrastructure that is being built. So in each of these cases, there will be very specific challenges or situations that we will need to address. As it was also previously mentioned, it's not the same building a facility in Canada than building it on the Mediterranean. So those clubs are also located in different areas, climatic areas of the world where water resources will be different. So what we are doing with this collaboration is, first of all, establish that baseline. So where are the consumptions? Then identifying the opportunities to reduce the consumption with technology for the most part. So a very important piece for us is metrology. We take it for granted, but it's not that clear sometimes the bills you get from the water utilities and how you integrate that into your own building management systems. What's the granularity, the frequency of this data? How do you spot if something is wrong? That's not so obvious for the facility managers, and some work needs to be done there. And alongside water efficiency, there is also energy efficiency that can be done. And then afterwards, that's the water reuse piece. So on water reuse, we also have lots of opportunities. It's also been mentioned before by Benjamin and Paul that the tendency is to reduce mains water and to reduce also sewage discharge for those facilities. So we have loads of opportunities in each site to look at that. So we can consider rainwater harvesting. we can consider borehole usage. We can also make gray water reuse. And the stage at which each club is a bit different. So this is a journey that we need to follow, and also consider the involvement of the wider local community, not only the club itself, also all the developments and real estate and the municipality around, because there are opportunities also to look at the ecosystem and water replenishment opportunities. So all in all, positive message ahead of World Water Day tomorrow. I think we're making progress. We're on the second half towards the Sustainable Development Goals, but there's a lot to play for. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Victor, and everyone on the panel for taking the time today. I believe we have one question in the chat. Feel free to pop any more in. We have about 5 minutes left, so anyone may take this question, or if you all want to go around the horn. Question is, how much coordination, if any, happens with the local water and wastewater utilities during retrofitting or construction and design?
I can take this one on.
Sure.
Quite a lot. As I pointed out in the project for Hillcrest Park, that was the curling venue for the Olympics, the code actually didn't allow for that in Canada at that time. So it took a lot of coordination with the utilities, for the local inspectors. For the Gary W. Harris project, the process was already in place at that municipality for what they needed to do, but it still took coordination with the municipality, and the municipality, to make sure that they are maintaining the standards, actually does regular water testing of their non-potable systems on that building, and to check to make sure that the water quality is there. With the San Remo Stadium, we are in the process of doing it, but there's coordination, collaboration with the local utilities. They want to understand what we're discharging, how much we're discharging, what we're going to be taking in. As an example, some municipalities don't like having waterless urinals because it gives a higher intensity of urea and it can crystallize in the system and stuff. There's options to look at that, but whenever we're going through any process, we are keeping the municipality, the local water authorities and sewer authorities in the loop, because our building is going to have an effect on their systems. And especially when we have a large, we're talking about sports stadiums where, a small one might be 15 to 20,000 people. You're talking about a whole community there. That's a town that is discharging sewage and taking in water and all these things. So it has an impact on their facility, and we need to understand that, and they need to understand it, and we need to collaborate with them, or else it just won't be successful in the long run.
Thank you, Ben. Another question, this one's for you, Victor. When attaching a campaign to a specific team, is there a risk that the fans of a major rival might not react as intended and not take the action we want them to take? How is this considered?
Of course, there is always that risk, but that's something that we don't believe is the core message of what we're talking about. Especially, we're always raising awareness about water that cuts across borders, clubs, religions. It's a problem or an opportunity for the whole world. So I think on those campaigns, we don't see the affiliation being critical. I think we are using, let's say, very, very famous or celebrities to deliver a message in a context that nobody's used to seeing them. Like, I don't know if you follow soccer, but of course on this campaign we have Pep Guardiola and Erling Haaland like being icons of football, world football, and you wouldn't expect them to talk about water, and I think this message goes beyond the colors of the t-shirt, I would say.
Well, thank you so much for that, and I would just say,
Matt, there's one other question there that I would love to answer just really quickly.
Sure.
It's has anyone worked on facilities that support water sports, and are there any different challenges with water usage from pools? And the answer for that really quickly, Jennifer, is yes. I've done lots of water sport facilities. The Hillcrest Park, as an example, did have a water sport component to it to serve the community in the area. And there are lots of additional challenges. Also, because with water, the way people use water in a pool is a lot different. You have interaction from the health authority, but there are abilities to reuse that water and also to use captured water to serve those systems, thinking in sort of creative ways. So if you're ever interested, feel free to contact me. We can talk about that more.
Of it. And just to recap on what Victor said, the Green Sports Alliance, we exist with a lot of folks that typically compete against each other, may not share much when it comes to on the field, but off the field, we're all aiming for the same goal, which is more sustainable sports. And so with that, using the platform that sports has to reach fans and kind of change behavior is why we exist. And really appreciate all of our panelists taking the time today. Thanks again.
Yep, and if anyone has questions for the panelists, you can email me and I will connect the two of you, Katie@greensportsalliance.org. Just a couple housekeeping items. We're having another webinar just in a couple of weeks here to celebrate Earth Month. It's going to be very intimate with just Shay and myself, and we'll have a special guest on there as well. And then, of course, the 2024 summit is coming up in June in Los Angeles. You can scan the QR code here to go to the registration. Early bird is 50% off, and it ends on April 13th. And if you're looking to get plugged into that, you can email myself or Matt on the call as well, matt@greensportsalliance.org. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. And we hope you feel like you got something out of it. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good job.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.